There were four major disputes during the second industrial revolution that we're going to be talking about. They're there. You could take your notes in this format. You could just wait to look at these notes here. So it's the same four. So the first one is the Great Railroad Strike that took place in 1874. The reason um, the workers started to strike was because they had two wage cuts in 2 months. The employers were also prevented from organizing, so they couldn't join a union. That was a major cause of the reason why they wanted to strike, because they wanted to form a union. By forming a union, you're able to fight for your rights as a worker. There was also injuries and deaths in the workplace, and nothing was really being done to improve the conditions. So that was the causes. The effects. So the strike went on in 1877, and there was a lot of bad things that actually went on here. So the railroads were halted. No railroads were going back and forth. These protesters, they protested the economic injustice by the railroads, because the railroads were making a lot of money, and yet they were paying the workers very little. And then protesters actually took it a step further, and they started to burn property. They overturned locomotives. They stopped all freight train. They stopped all passengers train. It was a mess. Eventually, the Pennsylvania governor needed to use the state militia, and also President Hayes needed to step in and send the troops to be able to prevent any further damage. Eventually, 50 people died. There was over 40 million lost in property damage. Workers were fired and blacklisted. Being blacklisted meant that your name was put on a list. That list was passed around from railroad to railroad, and then you could never get hired again in the railroad industry. Now, we see a little bit of conflict here, because this is a conflict between the employers and the employees. So the governor and the president getting involved is now, it's showing that the politicians are working on behalf of the railroads. And again, we see that time and time again, some form of economic injustice, political injustice, and corruption during the second industrial revolution. This slide kind of shows us a little bit about what was going on here. So this is a picture that shows the protesters burning some of the property of the company, one of the depots where some of these locomotives were being stationed. So it was pretty destructive. It was pretty destructive. That was the first major strike. The second one is, it was not a strike, it was a riot. The Haymarket Riot of 1886. This took place in Chicago, and the reason they first called a meeting in downtown Chicago, and they were kind of describing the poor treatments by the employees, of the employees by the employers. There was also police abuses and killings within the McCormick, which was a company that was growing a lot of grain. And so the company was hiring the policemen, and the policemen were going in there and mistreating the workers, which again kind of shows the connection between the employer and politicians, which shouldn't happen. So they were out there in the meeting. Eventually, it was 10 p.m. A lot of the people started to walk away. Police started to move in. As the police are moving them in, somebody throws a bomb. And then, of course, police open fire. The protesters open fire. Eventually, at the end of it, seven policemen are killed. One civilian, five are injured. Eventually, there's a sentence. 8 men were sentenced to death. Four of them were eventually hung. One of them committed suicide. The three were later pardoned because of the way that they were not given a proper trial. However, the union that were representing the workers, they were linked to radical and anarchists, and as such, there was an anti-union movement, and because of that, there was a decline in union membership after that. The Haymarket Square riot actually harmed the unions more than it helped them, which was unfortunate for them. So again, we'll leave it at that for now.